Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of news and opinions. Apple news and opinions. I am Apple Gaming SE, and we're going to start out with new subs. I am at 19 subs, so thank you, Thomas Kwilizek Schmer. I apologize if I got that wrong. It's not a name I see very often. We are going to jump right into the news this week. First thing, iCloud.com just got its iOS 17 and macOS Sonoma feature refreshes. So this is coming from 9to5Mac. A lot of my news comes from 9to5Mac because they are very good at discussing the latest goings-on and happenings. Basically, it's redesigned and it's got some new features. One of those is part of advanced data protection. So iCloud on the web is useful for users who want to access their personal data on Macs or PCs without being signed in at a system level. Optionally, iCloud.com can be disabled for an Apple ID as part of Apple's advanced data protection feature. Sorry, I spoke out of turn on that. So the advanced data protection feature has an option where you can disable iCloud.com access, which is pretty cool. So it's originally, according to them, worked like a virtual home screen of apps until last fall. That's when Apple deployed a huge design overhaul that transformed it into a web-specific design. The current version is based on customizable tiles. So I'm kind of 50-50 on iCloud.com. I think it's fine, but it doesn't do everything I want. For example, like password management, I still use a third-party app for that. I don't want to say what, but I use a third-party app for that. I don't use iCloud password manager because I can't, if I were to lose all of my stuff or lose access to my stuff temporarily, my iPhone or my Mac or my iPad, I wouldn't have a way of gaining access back to those passwords for something critical. Now, I think I know all of my critical passwords. You should too, but my main reason for not relying on all of the iCloud features is that you can't get to all the iCloud features from everywhere. There's ups and downs for that, certainly good for security, from a, if you lose access to your stuff kind of perspective, but downside is convenience is always the enemy of security, right? So, but overall, I think it's a cool design. Let's see, I'm reading through real quick. Yeah, there's nothing in here specifically about password manager. So I think that's cool. I think it's a cool redesign, but I don't think it's going to change the way that I use things, is the short version of that. Next story also is coming from Mac Rumors. Apple is to launch a 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro model with more power-efficient displays later this year. So they are suggesting that there is going to be new MacBook Pros in the fourth quarter of 2023, and that the mini LEDs will output the same brightness but use less power. So Apple is not going to try to get more brightness out of their laptops. They're going to just try to get more battery life, which I think is a fair trade-off. And I think given the power of the Apple Silicon systems and the battery efficiency that they already have, I think that Apple is kind of shooting for the moon in terms of battery life. They want to go for all day because you have good enough performance, and I think that's kind of where Apple's trying to hit this. They want good enough performance with all day battery life. So is there a reason to doubt this? And the primary counter argument is that most rumors suggest refreshed models are coming next year, which is what I had heard. I was thinking we wouldn't get the M3 stuff until next year. That will be a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years from when the M1 iMacs were announced. So getting them next year kind of makes more sense because it gives you a 2-year kind of release cycle, since those are less popular than the mobile Macs, so MacBook Pros, the MacBook Airs. Mark Gurman says the middle of 2024 is a more realistic expectation for M3 Pro and M3 Max chips. However, rumors also say Apple will start making its newest M2 Max for trade-in credit this month. So they're going to start taking the newest M2 Max for trade-in credit this month, which is good in terms of, like, if that's what you want to, if you want to kind of read the tea leaves on that. But I still think that middle of next year is more likely. I think it's more realistic that Apple's going to put its Pro and Max chips. They're going to push those out a little bit. I don't know. I don't know how the manufacturing with TSMC is going. See, if they try to take the basic architecture of the A17 Pro chips and then try to just ramp that up as hard as they can and get as many cores and GPU cores, like CPU and GPU cores, out of them as possible, you're going to have a lot of defectives, but they may only be partially defective, and you can sell them as M3, like the basic M3s, right? Or you could have M3 with 1 or 2 GPU cores disabled or something like that. If you're going for, and that may give you higher yield rates for more M3 chips to hit the middle of next year target. It would also give you more M3, like basic M3 chips. So I still think next year is more realistic, but my track record for this thing is kind of hit and miss. So who knows? who can say for sure? I guess we'll find out here before the end of November. Because if they're going to sell these things for the holiday season, they've got to have them on shelves by mid-November, late November at the absolute latest. Next story is coming from Macworld. The question or the title of the article is, was the iPhone actually better off with Lightning? The writer, Dan Morin, says you could generally feel confident that if you plugged in a Lightning cable into your iPhone or iPad, it would charge and transfer data exactly as you expected. He's making a reference to the Made for iPhone certification, MFi is what it's called. And essentially, we run into the issue of a single physical connector, which is USB-C, versus muddy information about transfer and power delivery speed. And this has been a long time issue for any device that isn't an iPhone. Now, the iPhone 15 and newer devices will get to weigh in on these frustrations. So, Dan Morin continues by saying that he's had issues with his CarPlay head unit and the USB-C cable that he has from a, quote, respected brand, end quote. He didn't say which brand it was. Morin goes on to say that Apple can push their partners like Belkin and Mophie to be a little more expensive than others and to make higher quality cables, but they can also push the sales of them in their own store, right? Like we know that Belkin is a big cable brand on Apple.com. And I get the argument. I recently had to go through the gaggle of cables that I have. I have a ton of USB cables. And figure out which is USB 2 and which is 3. And I'm pretty much trying to sell the whole lot of everything that isn't a useful USB 3 cable. And trying to figure out which ones from, if you're at a retail store, Target, or if you're even shopping online at Amazon, trying to figure out which ones are actually USB 3 is annoying, and then make sure it's the right speed, and is it the right, if you're looking at a USB 3 40 gigabit per second cable, and Amazon says you may also like this cable, and it's like $5 less, and you go to that page and it says nothing about transfer speeds, and you have to spend 5, 6, 7 minutes trying to figure out if it's USB 2 or 3, and it looks like most of the time it's USB 2. So it's just annoying to have to go through it, but it's not necessarily anything that's unexpected if you're coming from the Android world. My next news article is a little bit more fun. Coming from 9to5Mac, and it says, would you use your iPhone as a computer? And I think the most important part of this really comes from an app named Infinite X2P, and it's a nifty idea. I don't think you could realistically use your iPhone as a computer without something like this. For me personally, I probably wouldn't. I'm a Linux admin, and I spend a lot more time in the terminal than I probably should. And so I think I'd want to stick with macOS because I spend a fair bit of time in the terminal on macOS as well. 9to5Mac had a poll here, and I don't like the answer or any of the answer choices to this poll because I don't want full macOS on the iPhone. I don't want a watered-down web-based version of macOS. I already talked about iCloud.com earlier, and if it's in that same vein of functionality, I don't really want to deal with it. It's, all the same, it's cool, and I do some productivity work on my iPhone XR, and I'm hoping to one day do some more gaming on, say, like an iPhone 15 Pro Max, especially if I can hook it up to a bigger screen, which seems like it's totally possible. So it's just, it's going to be one of those things that, we're going to have to just wait it out and see how this develops. I think that there's potential in it. I think the Samsung DeX actually is a a phone that's like, or if you get a high-end Samsung phone, you can use the Samsung DeX feature, and I think that can provide a great deal of value to just working day to day. Have a full screen app of email or web browsing or word processing. Those are the things that I predominantly do, so it's not a lot of heavy lifting. Like, it's perfect for that, and you can play music in the background, you can watch YouTube videos in 1080p, and so Samsung DeX, for whatever the criticisms Samsung deserves, Samsung DeX is really, really cool, and I might be willing to consider it if there was an iOS kind of version like that, but again, that's kind of more of an emergency use case kind of deal, not day-to-day, since I do too much in terminal. My next story is that iFixIt has an excellent 7,000 times magnification view of the iPhone 15 during their teardown. For me, this was just a fun story. It's very fascinating to watch a close-up teardown of the iPhones. The iPhone 15 series is a lot more modular than any of the iPhones before it, but Apple's parts pairing scheme is making things difficult for independent repair shops and end users. I'm somebody who has repaired iPhones and iPads in the past. Given the option, I would do it again, but I don't necessarily always pick first-party repair components because they're so expensive. So, we'll have to see. Like, I fixed my mom's iPhone 6S a while back with an iFixIt battery and a screen from a seller on eBay, and that battery and that screen both worked perfect. So it's hard to it's hard to justify it being good that it's modular when you have parts pairing as kind of a shin level, something you can bang your shin on as you try to get through the process. So whether you think it's a big deal or not, I'll leave that to you. For me, I think I can see the problems with it, but I can also see the upsides to it as somebody who worked at Apple. And when you're the corporation that's responsible for millions of people's private data, and somebody could put a hardware component into a device that could theoretically circumvent the security, you got to be worried about that because it's going to be you liable for it on the back end. So I get where Apple's coming from. Again, I'll leave it to you to decide whether that's a justifiable reason for whether or not to keep parts pairing in place. The penultimate story for this week is that the iPhone Pro overheating has been resolved. Thermal photos are shown before and after. I looked at ZDNet, but there are other articles out there as well that are showing a certain improvement on the overheating issues. I'll start out by saying I was wrong about Apple rolling out an update to address the overheating stuff. I thought the beta would come out before Friday, but they released a full OS resolution for it. So I do think in my last video, I did think I said 17.1. So you could play with words and say, technically, I'm still correct, so I'm 1 for 1. I'll give myself some points on that one. But I think the bigger thing here is that, if we all make a big PR stink about it, especially with a new product, even a massive corporation like Apple is going to pay attention. The short version is that ZDNet saw the iPhone come down below 95 degrees Fahrenheit to 93.8 degrees Fahrenheit while fast charging. That's 34.33 degrees Celsius. They did some benchmark retesting, and they don't see any degradation in performance. So this is a big win for consumers and a reason that we should be allowing Apple the time to correct issues that are found. I'm aware that many customers are just making their voices heard. They're adding to the growing number of people who have encountered this issue to make sure that Apple is aware. If you don't tell Apple, they don't know. So I'm not beating up on anybody who's making their voices heard through calling into Apple Care or going to a Genius Bar or an Apple authorized service provider, or even just putting a post up on Twitter. It's the issue is I've seen too many people who just like to whine. They just want to make noise. They want to talk about how terrible this new product is. And it's not a swipe at Android fans. Working in retail and doing Apple Care and customer service, there are some people out there who just like to find problems with anything they buy, whether it's justified or not. It's just how they are. So for those people, I think just, if this reaches you, take a chill pill. Apple's going to get it sorted out. All of that said, what was actually fixed, that is somewhat unknown. Apple didn't make any information publicly available. They only detailed the security fixes. The channel Zolotech did a video that doesn't seem to show any meaningful differences in the iPhone 15 Pro temperatures. In their testing, they were above 40 degrees Celsius, which is 100 degrees Fahrenheit, before and after the 17.0.3 update. WCCF Tech said that performance while gaming, notably in Genshin Impact, had higher frame rates while the game was being played. Ars Technica and other heavy tech-focused websites didn't seem to say what Apple did to address the overheating issue. My opinion is that if the CPU and the GPU aren't being throttled, then on the hardware side, that leaves the neural engine or the system RAM. So they either slowed the neural engine or they constrained its processing, what it can and should process, or they perhaps did a small voltage regulation on the RAM. Since it's all one SoC and it's all paired together, it's possible. I don't think that the RAM is likely, but I just want to throw it out there as a maybe possibly could be kind of explanation. What is probably more likely, in my view, is that it's a software fix. Probably Apple says something to the effect of, if a program like Instagram or Uber or Asphalt 9 or whatever does not have version X of the app installed, like version 1.1 or newer, then throttle the CPU resources for that app. So the iPhone will probably throttle the app, say preventing Instagram from accessing the performance cores and only allowing it to access the efficiency cores. This is all just speculation on my part, and no one else seems to have any ideas that I can tell. And the last story for today is GSM Arena did an article named Apple FineWoven Case and Wallet Hands-On. The short version of this, because I think you should read the article for yourself, they couldn't find any major issues with the case, and they think it's very durable. Their testing, in my opinion, was not very stringent, and it was on the Pacific Blue phone case in the top wallet, the MagSafe wallet. And the only quote-unquote hard test was rubbing the outside with a blunt pocket knife bottle opener. There were permanent indentations created on the case, but nothing was as dramatic as what we saw in some of the Apple retail store pictures. So I don't know if you saw the pictures that came out, but you can go take a look at them. Some of the cases look really scratched up. You can see the indentation on GSM Arena's pictures, but they don't look nearly as bad as the Apple retail store photos. The liquid test that they did was just basically dousing the case in water, but only on the outside. And these tests do not address the complaints that people have had. It seems like it's not water that's the issue, it's other liquids that come out regardless of the degree of washing. So, if you spill coffee on the case or some other like different colored liquid, something that's not clear like water, people are not able to get that stain out of the FineWoven case, out of the fabric. The scratches and discoloring that the cases show due to fraying, it looks like it's fraying just the top layers of the FineWoven material. And I don't know about anyone else, but I've seen some very sharp keys in my pockets. So I think that their scraping that they did with their bottle opener isn't as sharp as like the keys I have. Like I have new house keys that are freshly cut, and those things are surprisingly sharp. They're not like sharp like a knife, but they're very, very crisp on the edges. So I think the potential for scratched up cases is higher than GSM Arena is willing to admit. That's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the stories. Leave any comments or questions below. Still looking for subscribers and likes, so please leave a like, leave a subscription here on YouTube, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.